to the Leo Training Podcast with Joe DeLeo. You'll hear in-depth interviews and tips from world-class athletes, coaches, and industry-leading experts to help you train smarter and improve at what you love to do. Train smarter, get stronger, move better, race faster. Here's your host, Joe DeLeo.
We're back with episode 59 of the Leo Training Podcast. And this week's guest is world-renowned kettlebell expert Steve Cotter. Steve Cotter is the founder and director of the IKFF, the International Kettlebell and Fitness Federation. Steve Cotter draws from an extensive and diverse background as a champion athlete and cutting-edge trainer to develop some of the most complete and exciting programs in strength and conditioning today. Throughout his lifelong study, Steve continues to research and implement the most effective training methods in kettlebells, martial arts, qigong, strength and conditioning, athletics, and human performance fields. He constantly improves his skills and abilities to benefit, teach, and motivate you. In this interview, Steve and I will discuss some of the differences between hardstyle and gear voice sport kettlebell training, as well as what is most important when it comes to training. As Steve would say, it all begins with the mind. So without further ado, let's roll to episode 59 with Steve Cotter. It all begins with the mind. Steve Cotter, welcome to the Leo Training Podcast. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to come on to the show. I'm really excited to have you on, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, my pleasure. We've got some great topics in store, but I would love for you to take a couple minutes and introduce yourself to the audience and let them know who you are, your background, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you. I'm Steve Cotter. I'm based in San Diego. And as far as my professional work, I provide education, primarily kettlebell training. My personal background includes very extensive martial art background in Chinese martial arts, specifically the internal martial arts. And the martial arts has a tradition of qigong, which is breathing exercise, as well as a very rich background of mobility. So what I do is I integrate sort of the East and West methods, the breathing and the meditative component with Russian kettlebell training. And so it forms a holistic approach to, mind, body and breath, fitness, wellness. So that's what I do is I provide kettlebell education, instructor training, instructor certification. I founded IKFF in 2008, and I've personally delivered courses in over 60 countries around the world.
Wow.
So that occupies most of my time, really, is, the teaching, the hands-on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm 47 years old. I could go on and on, but that's a starting point.
That's incredible. So, and I follow you, your website and on social media. So I know you're traveling quite a bit. So, one question I have, like right off the bat, is how do you not only like maintain your health and fitness levels, but like how do you not feel like crap coming out of an airplane for so many hours because you're traveling for 8, 10, 12-hour flights? Yeah, how do you maintain that, like keeping good range of motion, mobility, staying youthful?
Great question. Well, as far as how I do it, I'll tell you, as far as there being a template that would work for everyone, I'm not sure that exists. So first of all, everything is mind. The body is you could say subservient to the mind. As I like to say, the mind is the commander and the body obeys. And so whether we're talking about getting off an airplane, we're talking about maintaining health, fitness, vitality in the midst of a busy lifestyle and schedule, ultimately it comes down to balance, and balance can have different associations. Scientifically, we use the term homeostasis as it applies to, say, maintaining a healthy balance, really homeostasis. So really, that's what it comes down to, is how do I balance my lifestyle? And a lot of these principles will work for everybody. However, the formula has to be different for every person, because we're all unique and we have different stimulus, different exposures, different stress levels. So to really simplify the answer, it really comes to the mindset. It has to do with how we embrace each moment, because you can say, like, I'm a happy person, but if you're a happy person, it doesn't mean that every moment of life is blissful. It really means that we take a happy point of view to everything that occurs. So not really seeing the world in black and white, like good and bad. Like, I'll give you an example. When we were talking off camera, I'm telling you, I'm in San Diego. You asked me about the weather. You're in Providence. Okay, so there it's a snowstorm. Here it's San Diego, so it's sunny. Well, it's nightfall now, but sunny, warm every day. So, one could say, oh, the weather's good in San Diego and it's bad in Providence, but that's not really how life works.
Right.
Because, so having that perspective, my martial art training has informed me. And so that really influenced to this viewpoint. Taoism talks about the way, and everybody knows the famous ubiquitous symbol of the yin and the yang, or the yin and the yang. They use it for surfing as well, right? It's the dark and the white, and it just represents the interaction between things. So everything that we do, it's about finding a balance. For one person, that might mean that they spend, 4 hours a day in the gym. For someone else, it might mean they get in a 10-minute workout really quick. It's not that one is better than the other. It's just, how do we find that balance in our life? And also the priorities, because I'm 47 years old. When I was, say, 17, being in peak physical condition and progressing in that area and doing more, that was really one of the, if not the number one priority. Well, girls and that, those were my priorities, right? It's not anymore. Like, I still train, I still move. Now it's about being pain-free, being comfortable, still have goals, still have objectives I want to achieve, but I'm not a professional athlete. It's not my job. So I don't get anxious about, I got to get my workout in, or just you take it day by day. And, because there's other things, other responsibilities, and there's professional, there's relationship, family. If you have animals, you got to care for them, right? So all of us have these responsibilities, and it's really about, where do we find the balance in our responsibilities. So I take a very big picture approach to it. And it works for me because I know my body so well, because I've worked on myself for so many years, from the inside. And like I said, it's everything is mind, health. And it's not about, why are you healthy? Because I eat this, or because I take that supplement. All these things can contribute, but more powerful, more significant is really the attitude. That's why you see some people that have a very strict diet, but they're miserable because they're taking a mechanical viewpoint. And then you see people in certain cultures where they sit around and maybe they drink a lot of wine and eat fattening foods, and yet they seem to have great results with it. So there's more to it than just the chemical or the mechanical component. There is the psychology of everything that we do. And so really health is an attitude. And when you interview the centurions, they almost always talk about that, because most of them don't have model. There's some lady recently, or guy, I think Indonesian guy, He smokes. He drinks whiskey. I think he's like 114 or 116 now. But he says, they always say you have to have some reason. You have to have some reason to live. So it's about having the right attitude. I get off the plane and I'm like, all right, what's the next step? I don't have the attitude like, oh my God, I'm so sore. For sure, when you get off a plane, you want to get moving, go for a jog or stretch out. Definitely that's good. You don't want to just get off the plane and then. A couple times I got off the plane and I went straight to the gym and did like 8 hours of kettlebell. And I can tell you that's not, it's not really great for the body because you go from like compression to more compression. But it doesn't work out perfect, you have to adapt to whatever the situation is. So
sure. Yeah. But it all starts with the mind and the attitude.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's like our capability, our potential is so much greater, so I always believe in that. I believe that I'm capable of whatever the situation calls for.
I love that. That's great. So I recently just read and completed the home study course of your book, Kettlebell Training.
Cool.
Yes. Phenomenal resource.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to post a link of it in the show notes. And at the very beginning of the book, in the acknowledgments section, there's a quote that really jumped out at me. And I really love this. And it says, "One cannot truly understand all there is to learn without first understanding the work that came before us. And that brings us to our current state of knowledge." So I felt that was particularly important to highlight because you're making reference to the fact that to continue to move forward and progress, we also need to appreciate and understand where we've come from. Correct?
I believe so. Yes, I believe so. So we can say history, absolutely, is of huge importance. Yes, I believe that. And because time, as we normally express it, does not exist. There is no future per se. There is no past. Past exists as memories. The future exists as a concept of something, but the only thing we physically can impress is the current moment. And so if one has an outlook that whatever they have achieved is because of them alone, it's a very, well, I would say it's naive. It's not an honest outlook because, we're all a part, we're all interconnected, and there's almost nothing that we can do that hasn't already been done before. We may be able to put things together in new combinations, but knowledge exists. It doesn't exist because of one person, regardless of how knowledgeable that person can be. Right. And I really believe that. So it's a respect also for culture, respect for experience.
Absolutely. Is there anything in particular historically that really has resonated with you throughout your career, or that like you take time to like refer back to often?
All of history. So his story is his story, which is the story of man. And of course, that's put in a sort of a male dominant language. So it could be the story of humanity, to include women as well, right? So we're not so archaic to still think about things in those terms, hopefully. But, his story is the story of man. So I want to know as much as I can possibly know. And of course, we're never going to know everything, probably. So at least not in this life, in this world. So it's not like I refer just to one thing. It's more about uncovering more information, researching, studying, trying to understand, trying to put the pieces together. There's definitely historical figures that serve as either mentors, guides, examples that we can learn from. And a lot of times those historical figures may have been very well developed in a certain area of their life and maybe not in another area. So we can celebrate a person for their accomplishment without necessarily having to judge their entire character, right? Because we all have, we can say good and bad within us, or light and darkness. We're all capable of making mistakes. So there's no one person that is perfect in every way or doesn't have their, so if we mention someone famous like Martin Luther King, well, why is he famous? So he was able to organize and things like that. So there's lots of historical figures that I definitely refer to, but I wouldn't say there's one point in time. It's like first man and first woman. That's, I guess, the starting point.
Right. No. Okay. That's good.
We're all children. I believe that we all come from, like, historical, not theory.
Sure.
We all are descendants of ancestry. So if we go back in time, we all descend from a few tribes. In the early days of human existence, we come from tribal, and the whole earth wasn't populated. There was people in probably certain pockets, and then it grew from there. So I see it that we're all actually descend from just a very few families, a very few tribes, you see. So I see myself as a part of that. I see all of us as, in some way, we're brothers and sisters, whether we like each other or don't. None of us are better or greater or lesser than anyone else. So all we can try to do is try to become as knowledgeable and as skillful as we can in our particular area of expertise.
That's great. And that's such a positive message.
We need it. We need positive messages because people are very confused. And, honestly, this is a great time. It's a great time to be alive because change is occurring so rapidly. And it's just, we have to be prepared. And again, it comes down to balance again. It comes back to that point, is having that foundation within yourself. We have to look within for the answers. We cannot look without. Like, there's not something outside of ourselves that provides the solution. We have to be responsible. Each person has to be responsible, so we can support each other. But, a person can't support another person if they don't have a strong foundation themselves.
Right.
That's why probably kids shouldn't go around having a bunch of babies, for example, because they don't even know what they're doing yet. So, it's hard to love something and take care of something if you don't love yourself and take care of yourself. And if you do, now you have a foundation, and then you can build upon that. So, being a teacher, it's like with kettlebells, because I'm supposed to just be a kettlebell guy, right? I'm not supposed to have opinions about anything else in the world of significance. So, so if we just keep on topic of kettlebell, if I teach somebody kettlebell, it's not like I can teach everything there is to know or everything there is to be taught. It's more like planting seeds and giving tools, So if I'm teaching you, at some point you have to take that information and you have to work with it. Like, you have to practice, because even if I teach you perfectly, if you just take notes and practice that day and then you never practice again, it's not going to be useful, right? Like, it's only as useful as your ability to use it. So that's all we can really do, is we can sort of support each other and plant seeds, but it's still up to the individual to take that information and actually work with it. And when we work with stuff, we progress. So if we just apply that standard to ourselves, and that's how we get ahead in life, is we just keep improving, and I think it's really mindset. A lot of times when we talk about success, most of us are conditioned to think success equals financial success, money success, right, which is one expression of success. But sometimes we can look and see people that either have or appear to have a lot of financial success, like they have a lot of money or symbols of wealth, and they can be a miserable person, but that doesn't mean that they're successful as people. And so, again, it comes down to balance in all the important things and balancing it. Now, for me, financial is one of the important things, but it's not the only, right? Because I put health at a higher, and happiness and other things and relationships, so it's whatever is important, finding the balance to where all those things are healthy, and then you can put the time where the time is more needed or where you enjoy putting the time.
That's
and
good. I like that.
So I use all the training that I do, all of it I use either mentally, physically. It's all, because if you can't use it, it's not practical. It's not worth, Bruce Lee said, absorb what is useful, discard, what is not useful. Right. Paraphrasing, but, right. Discard what's not necessary, keep what is useful. So, and that's it. It's about practical application. And I've always professionally stayed with the fitness because the body is the fastest way that we can progress change. If you're not exercising, then you start exercising, you will undergo rapid changes. And so, but that's not the only. It's like we can't just focus on the body and forget the other parts of ourselves. And that's, it's like if I'm a bodybuilder and I'm in the gym and I'm working on my body all the time, but I'm only going to get so far in life. So for me, the physical training has to inform the mental and vice versa. It also has to do with the mindset when you're training too. When you're doing your physical training, your mind needs to be in that present moment, aware of the movement. It's not just about burning calories, and so there's so much information out there now. We're starting to understand so much more about all of these things and bringing it together. So I think it's a really exciting time to be alive. However, people have to become more disciplined with themselves. They have to become more disciplined with their emotions, with their habits, with the words. These are the real powerful things, is what we think, what we say, and what we do, because that shapes the reality that we actually experience.
No, it truly does. Do you feel like, I guess overall at this point society has more of a tendency to focus more on the physical or the fitness without paying as much attention towards the mindset component?
It would appear that way. But again, if you're, my guess is that, what I would say is that it's moving. If things are moving, things are correcting. However, in a moment to moment, in the day to day, we don't see the changes. Like, sometimes things appear like they're not moving, or they're going backwards, or they're moving slowly, because we don't see the etheric. We only see the material. So that perception is out there. And if your reference point is social media or media in general, then of course that's going to be the perception, because the nature of media is it's very materialistic. It's very much focused on the sensory world, the physical body, the sight, the sound, And so, but that's not to say that it doesn't exist, because there's people like myself and many others that do understand the significance of the mind. And, I'm a lot more mature in understanding this because of my age and also my lifestyle. And so it's not like one or the other. Like, we can age and be very slow to learn also. So just with more age, we gain more experience, but we don't necessarily gain more wisdom unless we use that experience to make more informed choices, So I guess what I'm saying about that is there will come a point in time where someone will learn sooner or later that they have to give more thought than just the physical, like if it's just about building your muscles, lifting heavier weight, doing more reps, you will reach a physiological limit to where you will reach an apex of your skill. Well, I'll put it this way. Michael Jordan is retired because he's not good enough to play at that level anymore. And that's why he retired. He wasn't able to dominate or play to the level of his standard, and he was, so far he's considered the greatest player of all time. So what better example does someone need? If the best ever, even that person eventually stops getting better and then he only starts going down. So if it's going to do it to Michael Jordan, it's going to do it to all of you too, right? Right. If your frame of reference and your self-concept is based upon being the biggest or the baddest or the fastest or the strongest or the best looking, one day you're going to have to cash it in. Somebody better is going to come along. So the sooner you come to terms with that and make plans for that, the better, rather than after the fact, because we are more than our body. That's the whole point. And so people are getting smarter, but the popular workouts, of course, are just about burning calories. It's just nowadays it's based upon what we call functional training. So it looks sexier when you're doing with an Olympic bar versus, doing step aerobics like they were doing 30 years ago. But at the end of the day, it's all about bodybuilding and burning calories. Where's the mind at? You know what I mean? What's it leading to? Because there's still a lot of look at me. I'm doing it because I want to look good, or, it's like you're still worried about what other people think. So it actually is bodybuilding. It's just a different style of bodybuilding. It's not about Arnold Schwarzenegger style and getting as big as possible and as ripped as possible. It's about checked out my workout, or, but the point is you're really focused upon how you look and how other people think you look and the appearance. So that's not the highest level. The highest level is it's like the art of war, right? To this day, I don't know how many thousands of years that text is, but to this day, it's kind of the go-to strategic blueprint, right? Wall Street, everybody reads the art of war. Okay, so the art of war says the highest, the pinnacle of skill is not to win 100 times in 100 battles. The pinnacle of skill is to win without fighting. So the highest level of warfare is you win without even having to raise a finger, right? So that, again, it says about the power of the mind. So with regards to fitness, that's good, working hard and all that, but you have to also take care of your mind. And my question is, are you still going to be able to do it 20 years from now? You're going to be able to do it when you're 50, 60, 70, 80, and beyond? Because if you can, my dogs are probably hear them. If you only can do it when you're 20, 30 and start to lose it already when you're in your 40s, then it's not really the perfect program, because it's not sustainable. So the longevity is of huge importance. Everyone that's more than 40 is probably nodding. They're like, yep, because it's like pain. You got pain? Are you stiffness? Did you lose? Are you restricted? Do you have limitations? And if it's athletics and it's a choice, then okay, you can look back on that and say, I made a choice because I was pursuing some glory and I won, or I didn't win, whatever. It was worth it. But, probably, I don't know. It's not for me to say for other people. People have to say for themselves. But for the most part, nobody enjoys walking around in pain, Yeah. And it's like, man, my back, always in pain. And it's like it flares sometimes or it doesn't, or you're taking some medication. Medication is not sustainable. You know what I mean? You can't just keep taking painkillers and anti-inflammatories forever. That's another subject. But or you just live with it, and sometimes it's better and sometimes it's worse, but you kind of suppress it, but it's always there. And that's a lot of people. What I'm saying is you don't have to. I don't have pain. I'm capable of feeling pain. Sometimes I have pain, but for the most part, I walk around like, 17-year-old kid. My body, you know what I mean? I'm 47. Not trying to brag on myself. It's not about me. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is I know from experience that we don't have to live with a lot of pain. And so for me, that is really the priority, the mobility, the flexibility, and then again, the rest is ratio of strength, endurance. How much of this do you need? How much of that do you need? What's your priority? If it's competition, then, the competition results is number one priority. But if it's just life, the priority will probably be different. For me, it's just being happy, feeling good. That's the priority. Whether it means I got to do this much with kettlebell or whether I have to do that, that's secondary. I'm looking at the cause, not the effect. So, that's where we're at. I think with the mainstream fitness, they haven't evolved to the level of what I'm talking about yet, but there's a lot of people that understand it and are going in that direction for sure.
Right. Yeah, it's going to take some time, but it sounds like we're moving in a positive direction. It was really interesting point you made about the kind of where you put things in terms of your priorities at this point in life, and it's just like continuing to be moving well, out of pain, being happy. And that's very different if you're a high level athlete and your sports career or that's your main profession is to compete on a daily basis. So you need to be in tip top shape, and usually that comes with riding that kind of fine line of having high performance and potentially being.
Yes, I would just interject slightly that what I'm seeing though is that if you really look at the best of the best, you will see that they have all aspects. Like, I'll give you an example. Football is the most violent sport. You can make an argument for fighting, but in football, they actually take more generally. Well, it depends. Boxers take a lot, pugilism in the head, but definitely football is up there in terms of the trauma. You look at Jerry Rice, Deion Sanders, those guys move around still pretty well. You look at other sports, a guy like Jordan. When you look at the best of the best, see, they understand the significance of mobility and they allow for it in their careers. The rest of them, they don't allow for it until it's almost too late or until they have to, So what you're saying is, again, it's most people, but the true elites, they're going to have all aspects covered. They're going to be high level performance, but they're also not necessarily going to sacrifice their body to the nth degree. Yes, there's a sacrifice with everything. Every time you get in your car and drive is a sacrifice. So right. There's no such thing as no sacrifice, but doing the things that maximize the holistic point of view, those things are going to be done, by the really, I think the elites have to have the intelligence and the kind of mindset as well as the physical. And the ones that are a notch below, they have the physical, but they may not have all the pieces.
Right. So to keep your body feeling good, do you do like a daily kind of joint mobility work?
Well, yes and no. I mean, joint mobility, I don't have any single routine that I do. But my priority is movement. I do daily movement. So I lean more towards what would typically be called flexibility. If I were to, put names on it, and that's the thing, when we have labels, we can assume it refers to something and it might refer to something else. Like the term joint mobility is commonly used. And usually when people say joint mobility, what they're actually referring to is what's technically called joint rotations. Okay. And just a little bit of definition of terms so that people understand, what things actually mean. Joint rotations are similar, but different to what would be called dynamic mobility. Okay. So a lot of times joint mobility programs will have a mixture of joint rotations and dynamic mobility, and they just call all of it joint mobility, right? But The actual definition of joint mobility is joint rotations, which means you're rotating the joint on a fixed plane of motion. So for example, if I'm doing an elbow roll, right? That's a joint rotation of that particular joint. Whereas a dynamic mobility is something where you're increasing the range of motion and the speed as it progresses. So like doing a straight leg kick, swinging your leg up and back, and then increasing the range of motion as you get warmer. That's a dynamic mobility, right? So those can be put together. But what I focus on more is flexibility. Because the way that I do it, the joint mobility is much easier. I can do I don't need to do it because my joints are always loose. I don't have tightness in any of my joints. So I personally, I don't do a joint mobility routine daily, but I always teach it. When I run courses, I always start with the joint mobility in the warm up. And that's something that I definitely make sure in the education that a teacher knows how to do. Because that's very useful for the large majority of the population, especially aging population that has desk jobs. Everybody's in pain. So the joint mobility is a very good way and safe way to kind of eliminate and reduce. But for me, the flexibility is what allows you to actually progress in it. And so that's what I focus on because I'm always focusing on progressing. I'm not really interested in maintaining. Maintaining is easy. That's homeostasis. You just find that balance. It's easy if you know how to do it. It's not easy if you don't know how to do it. But I've done it because I've done it my whole life because I was exposed to internal martial arts when I was 12 years old. So for me, fitness has never been a goal because I've never not been fit. It's only about how fit do I need to be or want to be. And then it's a goal like, okay, I'm going to compete in some competition. Now you have to train because you have a tangible result in mind. But for lifestyle, that's not necessary. You just go on how you feel. See, so that's how I do it. But flexibility, when we use the word flexibility, most people think that it refers to static flexibility. And actually in the literature, the popular literature, flexibility has almost taken a back seat to mobility. And in some circles, even it's considered bad. Like in a lot of the strength conditioning literature that's come out over the last, 10 years or so, they say flexibility is detrimental to the power athlete because it slows them down. But that just shows a fundamental misunderstanding. They're not teaching the athletes that they do the studies, they're not teaching them how to stretch correctly. And so, of course, they're going to get bad results because they're not using correct movement. But if you really understand what flexibility means, flex means to contract. So if I flex my bicep, I'm contracting the bicep, right?
Right.
Flex can also mean to bend. It has more than one meaning. So it means to bend, so it's flexible, but it also means to contract. So actually, to correctly stretch is you have to contract the muscle. You have to really contract the muscle, and the stronger you contract, the more you can lengthen because you contract one side and you lengthen the opposite side. So it works in opposition. So actually, flexibility is strength training when you understand how to do it. So that's how I do it. And so with that, when you're working on your range of motion, the joint mobility is more maintenance. Because joint mobility, you're not increasing the range of motion. You're doing a bunch of movements to warm the joint for the circulation. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it. Most people need it. But if you're moving, like for me, I use kettlebell for joint mobility. Like snatch, for example, that's joint mobility for that movement pattern. You don't necessarily always have to do it heavy. You can use lightweight or medium weight, right? You're doing a lot of reps with correct alignment. There's joint mobility. So, there's many different ways to do it. The saying is all roads lead to Rome. So actually the saying is Tutte le strade vai a Roma. Right, that's all the roads lead to Rome. I have to say it in Italian.
That was good. You caught me off guard there with the Italian.
Learning.
That was great. Thanks for providing some clarification on the definitions and sort of where we can get often confused in what the meanings are. I know for myself, I've until you gave those definitions, I had associated a different meaning with a lot of those words.
Yeah. That's why, that's why it's important to have a common reference point when we're talking about things, because there's a lot of generic topics, not just in fitness, but, it's like a good example is CrossFit. What does that consist of exactly, right? The definition maybe 20 years ago or 15 years ago when it started, it, might have been a little different, but it could be anything. Is it parkour? Is that CrossFit Olympic weightlifting? Is that CrossFit kettlebell? All of it, right? Because if all of it is, then nothing is. So a lot of times it causes confusion when a person is less educated and communicating. Like, we have to use what's appropriate for the person. It depends on their background, their situation. If someone is 70 years old and they haven't exercised for 30 years, totally different than if someone's been active their whole life and maybe they're 30 years old and they're looking to be a competitive athlete. Very, very different needs in that. There's going to be some overlap because everybody has a body, but it does not follow the same program. Right. It has to be a different program.
Absolutely.
So you use what's appropriate for you. That's what I do for myself. And when you have experience, you understand how to determine those things. And again, since there's many ways to achieve the same objective, like all roads lead to Rome, you don't need anything. All you actually need is you need your body and you need your mind. You need your willpower to decide to do it. But you don't need a kettlebell. You don't need a barbell. You don't need a BOSU. You don't need a TRX. You don't need any of those things. You don't even need running shoes. You just need to move. So how you move, okay, so now there's many options. But most of it is about what's going to keep you interested to get you to do it. Right? I like kettlebells, so I'm going to do kettlebells. So the kettlebell gets you moving, but if you didn't have the kettlebell and you still moved, you would still get great benefits.
Right. So that's just the kettlebell is one particular tool that you enjoy to.
Yeah, because I look for overlap and I like to keep it simple. So, the kettlebell is such a fantastic tool because it addresses multiple qualities simultaneously. So I don't have to do 5 different things to address 5 different aspects. I can address 5 aspects with one thing, right? So that's more efficient. Like with a kettlebell, if I want to work strength, I can because I can progress the load, heavier weight. If I want to work endurance, I can because I can progress the volume, more reps. If I want to, increase power and focus on that, I can also use it that way because it's work per unit of time. So I can go faster, do more reps per minute. So many different, it's very versatile with that, where a lot of tools don't have that versatility. Like, if you want to work for an hour without stopping, probably a barbell is not really the tool that you're going to use for that. It doesn't make sense. So you can do like running, you can do kettlebell. That makes sense. You can use those for that type of thing. But at the same time, if you want to develop 1 rep max and you're already really strong, now it makes perfect sense to use a barbell because probably you're not going to have a kettlebell heavy enough, right? And running isn't going to help you. So, for my needs, the kettlebells is a great kind of focal point because I can use it to do a lot of different things. And then you just balance that out. What else do I need to do? So what I do with the flexibility is I healed myself. I've always focused, I always did a lot of flexibility when I was a kid, for all those years training martial arts. And then I always had a a good amount of flexibility from that. But then I moved away from it, really working on it for a lot of years. And traveling around the world as much as I do, and mainly I go to Asia. Like China is my main market. I go there, 6 to 10 times a year now. So I'm sitting 15 hours, in a single flight, maybe 24-hour travel. It's a lot of compression. So after many years of doing that, I was getting very stiff back, and it was stiff all the time, and it would be very painful sometimes worse than others, and so I was still teaching a lot of kettlebells and getting work, but I wasn't doing enough of the range of motion. So I would use, joint mobility to kind of warm it and loosen it, but that's not the same as fixing it. And it got so bad to where about 2 years ago, I said, well, I got to do something, and I'm not a fan of the modern, the surgical. Yeah, if it's needed, great. But as far as like, oh, I got a back pain and here's some drugs and now we're going to cut you. No, that's like very barbaric.
Yeah.
It's about healing. So I said, oh, I got to take charge of this situation. I got to figure out. So then I started really studying in depth and really focusing on the flexibility, and I've just kept it, because for me, I got myself completely out of pain. And then I learned and taught myself how to, if I have pain, how can I find it? How can I focus the area, and how can I release it? And there's other techniques, like people like foam rolling and rolling on balls, and all those things can be useful. But if you really understand the flexibility, you're not going to use that stuff very often. You're not going to need it. Some people, they just foam roll or they do joint mobility. They don't do flexibility. They're not really optimizing. They're not tapping into their full potential. And, because the foam rolling and those things, you have knots. So you want to try to loosen the knot, so to speak, and then you can stretch it. That's the idea. But it's just those knots are going to keep coming back. And so you got to keep rolling it. And if your body is balanced, you don't really need to roll it. You don't feel a need because you don't have those knots. And so that's my point of view. And it's not like a comparison like, oh, this is better than that. All things can be useful, but the idea is to get out of pain. The idea is to get away from the things, the necessities. So if we have to always take painkillers or aspirin, or we have to always, roll things out, those are indications that there's still an underlying problem. Whereas if you can find the root of that and address it, we may not be able to do that ourselves. That's why, we can see therapists and specialists that help us identify it. But once you identify it, then the work still comes back to the person. They got to do the work, right? A physical therapist, they can show you, do these exercises, but you still have to do them to get so that's what I did with myself. And, so it's an experiment of one. Those are the best kind, because then, like what I'm talking about, I know it's not a guess. It's not a theory. It's real, because I prove it with myself. So I know for sure. I'm not saying everyone has to do it the same way that I do it, but I'm saying that I know from experience, because it's like before and after, and you can compare. So that's, for me, the main thing is the flexibility. All the other things I just add to that. And then it changes. Like right now, I haven't been doing a lot of traveling this month and last month. So I've been able to stay at home for a while. So I'm able to do a lot more. I've been doing a lot of rowing, my C2, kettlebell. I'm always doing kettlebell in courses, but that's teaching. It's different than if like you're training yourself. Right? Different exercises are different. When you're training myself, it's more simple, just focusing on one or two basic lifts or just a few basic things. The rowing and the flexibility, that takes care of everything else. Meditation, and then of course, most people don't talk about it, or they put too much emphasis in the wrong areas, but nutrition, you can't separate nutrition from movement. We have to eat, we have to move, and then we have to repair. So those three things everybody has to do. Doesn't matter what program they're using. So that's foundational too, right? Is how I eat every day. That's foundational. Movement is almost as important, not quite, but that's the second, the almost 1A and 1B.
Right. No, those are huge keystone pieces for everyone, for sure. That's really cool. So you use the concept to rowing machine.
Yeah, because it fits, fits what I want to do right now, and it's not a movement that I've, traditionally done a lot of, so it's very beneficial in terms of general cardio, but also with power. It's a good power development, and bang for your buck. I think it rates very high, and it's just, I'm at home, so when I start traveling again in a couple of weeks, and then it's going to get real busy again, I'm probably not going to be doing rowing for, most of the year, but I'll take advantage of it.
No, that's awesome. That's
while I have access to it. Yeah.
Excellent. Have you ever had a chance to get out on the water, like in a sculling boat or a sweep boat?
No, I've never done formal rowing. I mean, not since I did a kayaking trip when I was in summer camp years ago in the Appalachians. Cool. But I haven't done that. So I just been limited to the C2 in terms of the rowing movement. Awesome. And kettlebell long cycle is a similar movement in terms of energy system and movement pattern. It's like rowing on a vertical. Oh, not exactly, but it has a lot of carryover. There's a lot of similarities there.
Yeah, no, I'm just kind of thinking of the movement in my mind, like
so the clean and jerk, or the clean and press. So you have a pull, and then you have a press. You have a lower body to upper body transfer, and then back. Right. And you have a concentric and an eccentric, and obviously it's a cardio in terms of you're doing repetition. So there's definitely if you analyze the movement as far as the dominant movement plane, with the kettlebell you're getting even more upper body, but there's definitely a lot of grip. There's a lot of leg involvement, a lot of back, lower back involvement, a lot of grip, and a lot of cardio. So in that respect, they're very similar. And it's kind of moving on that, that sagittal pull, yes. Pull push. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of segues nice into one of the topics we had down. So I would love to get some of your thoughts on, some of the technical differences between hardstyle methodology and kettlebell sport. Competitive, just in terms of breathing, or maybe the way that the technique of a lift, snatch, for example, is executed, those types of things, and also how a cast iron kettlebell versus a competition kettlebell may factor into that, because the competition bells, the size doesn't change, both in terms of the handle and the bell size, versus the cast iron ones. As you go up in weight, they're getting bigger and bigger.
Yep. Okay. Well, there's kind of the what would be expected, and then there's my answer. So, since I'm a student of the game, I see it as, the quote unquote hard style. It's actually a brand name. It's a brand name that's associated with the Strong First. And prior to that, the RKC. So the RKC system, which eventually, became Strong First, that's sort of their brand of kettlebell methodology that they teach, hardstyle. And then you referred to Griovoy Sport, which by definition is competition. But in terms of methodology, there's really no such thing as either, in the sense, because it really comes to the individual. So I don't even really refer to hard style, because that doesn't actually make any sense to me as far as the use of a kettlebell. And in terms of the historical progression of, if you look back at the history of kettlebells, what they were first used for, what they became used for, and then what they are now used for. So it kind of went through stages, right? Just like everything is. If you look at now, looking at it as a sport gives you a different perspective than if you're just looking at it from a basic fitness. Okay, so that's really probably a more accurate way of describing the differences between, hard style and gravy voice sport is really has more to do with the level that you're talking about and the objective. If the objective is you're starting at a basic level and you want to go up to maybe an advanced basic level, that's where the hard style is. Okay. If you want, at the same time, if you see the kettlebell more as the end rather than as the means, if the point of your kettlebell training is the kettlebell itself, then it's really about how far you can take it. So that's going to be the guerrilla voice sport, because that's the progression of the system. There's no way to really make a comparison, unless you have a definition of a standard, because if the question is which one's best, then the answer has to be, how are you defining best? So people cannot be confused by branding. If you understand it as a sport, then it's just about results. Like if you talk about anything else besides kettlebells, if you talk about basketball, there's no difference, right? Like the highest level of NBA, Michael Jordan, right? So that would be the top of the mountain. The bottom of the mountain is you're playing as a kid at school or whatever, right. But it's the same sport. It's a ball, it's a basket. You're trying to get it in the basket, and defense. So the rules are the same whether you're a brand new beginner or the best ever, right? The rules are the same. The only question is, how far along that path do you want to take it, and are you able to take it? Okay, so if you just want to burn some calories and you don't want to be a professional kettlebell person or compete or anything like that, then hardstyle works perfect because it's very simple. But if you want to be really great, then you have to learn about the traditional modern training methods of the Russian kettlebell, which is really a sport, guerrilla voice sport. Right? But it doesn't make a difference if you compete or you don't compete. Like, your skill is your skill. So if you compete on a platform or if you just train by yourself in your garage, your level is your level. It doesn't make a difference, right? Whether you're demonstrating it or not demonstrating it. So breathing, it's very, very different. Like I only refer to the modern kettlebell sport, what you call the guerrilla voice sport. I only refer to that because that's the available knowledge. Like all the history and the knowledge and everything that's been studied and researched and tested, it came into that. So hard style, the method, it would be like maybe 50 years back in time before we knew all the things that we know now. It doesn't mean it's not good. It's highly effective. Some people might be hardstyle. They're listening. They're offended. Please don't be offended. You're either good or you're not good. Like if you're a trainer or you're a lifter, you're good or you're not good. If you're good, you're good. It doesn't matter the style. But what I can say for sure is you're only going to take it so far if you only know hardstyle. You're only going to take it so far because sooner or later, how heavy are you going to go? The kettlebell is going to get to a certain point. Then if you're going to go heavier, you need a barbell. It's not going to be heavy enough to keep doing 1 rep max with the kettlebell. Kettlebell is not for 1 rep max. So what is it? It's for more than one. You see? So if I do 1 rep and I can do 1 rep, that means I'm strong enough to lift it. So if it doesn't get heavier, the only way I can progress is now I have to do 2 reps and 3 reps. And so you keep going. How many reps can you do? That's kettlebell. Powerlifting is something different. Keep adding weight to the bar. Keep adding weight. I do it once, add some weight. I do it once, add some weight. I do it once, add some weight. Now I can't do it. I peaked out. So I got to train and get past that point where now I can lift heavier. That's powerlifting 1 rep max. Kettlebell, it's not a max weight. It's a sub-max. It's how many reps. Okay? So that's the honest truth about what kettlebell is for. It's strength endurance. Kettlebell sport is strength power endurance. mostly power endurance, not strength in the conventional sense, because it's not a 1 rep max. A barbell is more for strength. Okay, so about the breathing, it's good for what they do. If you're going to do like 10 reps, 20 reps, hard style breathing's fine. Inhale and swing. Inhale in the bottom, exhale at the top. 1 breath, 1 rep. But for kettlebell sport, you're doing many. You can't breathe like that because you're going to hyperventilate. You got to take more than 1 breath. You have to breathe twice for each rep. So you keep your heart rate stable. Now, that's just the swing I'm talking about. Other lifts, you have to do more than 2 breaths. The clean, you do at least 3 breaths. Snatch, 3 or 4 or more breaths. So, there's a science to all this. You have to understand what's the application. So it depends on 3 main things, Joe, to really simplify my answer. There's 3 main things you got to understand with your kettlebell workout. I don't care what you call it, hard style, guerrilla sport, do it good, do it well, okay? But there's 3 things. What's the weight of the kettlebell? How many reps are you going to do? And what's your speed of movement, which is repetitions per minute? So those are the 3 things you can vary. You can vary the load, lighter or heavier. You can vary the reps. You do more or less reps. You can vary also time, but time and reps work together because the longer you work, the more reps you're going to do. So reps and time, we kind of are equivalent. You do more weight, you do more reps, and then it's how fast. You look at a movement like the press or the push press. With the same weight, you could do 5 reps a minute, 8 reps a minute, 10 reps a minute, 20 reps a minute, 30 reps a minute. Totally different game. That's the power, work per unit of time. So hopefully that simplifies so people can understand actually how you're using the kettlebell. But if someone's really interested in learning everything there is about the kettlebell, they have to know all of it. They can't just stop with hard style. I mean, you can get great results for fitness. There's many excellent hardstyle instructors. There's many fit people. But if you're just going to do kettlebell and you want to take kettlebell as the highest possible, then you have to learn how to do the high reps if you really want to know everything there is to know. And then there's also juggling. That's a totally different. Like juggling is another part of kettlebell. So there's so much to learn. But for me, I've seen it all in so many years. For me, the kettlebell sport is just much more impressive, and it's a much higher level because that's like, it's probably one of the toughest sports that there is as far as the mind and the body, as far as toughness, because it's nothing but pain. You know what I mean? It's nothing but pain, but you choose. And there's a totally different pain between, 10 rep pain and 100 rep pain, So it's like the difference between running a 5K, you're in good shape. You can run a 5K or a 10K without training for it because you're already in good shape. But you're not going to run an ultra marathon unless you actually been doing some volume. So kettlebell sport's like an ultra marathon with a weight.
Yeah, the way you describe it, it kind of reminds me of, it's not the same distance, but it kind of reminds me of rowing a 2,000 meter rowing race, because it's only 2,000 meters. Most of the races are, depending on the boat class, anywhere from, sub 5:30 in a men's 8 to around 7 minutes. But if you're rowing at 35 to 40 strokes a minute in that time period, it's a lot of
the power.
Yep.
It's the power output. Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's probably the factor for most athletics is the power component. And that's kind of the attractive thing that in strength conditioning, most people are interested, whether you want to call it Metcon, however you call it, it's work per unit of time. And, so, and that's the lactate, the lactate threshold. That's the pain. That's where the muscles start burning. But like you said, with the rowing, you can also go much longer. You can do 10,000 meters. So you have the endurance. There's always some degree of power, but it's different if you're doing sprint versus if you're doing a very long.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And with kettlebell, you can do either as well. And the difference is you can vary the resistance much more, where something like rowing, it's going to be, for the most part, a fixed resistance, you know, during that particular workout anyway.
Yes. Yep.
And obviously on the water, it's going to be very little variability, I would imagine, in the resistance. So that's where the kettlebell, you can make a big change. And, that makes it very unique, because if you look at it, it is an endurance sport, but most endurance sport don't really have the power output component, and kettlebell does. So that makes it a very useful training method for so many sports, because you can manipulate and increase that power output easily by increasing the load or increasing the reps per minute. And, so if we compare the best professional kettlebell lifters, they're going to lift heavier than you, they're going to lift faster than you, and they're going to lift longer, and, the best hard style guys, the real strong ones, are going to be able to do, heavy load for sure, but they're not going to be able to do a lot of reps. And so with the kettlebell, the reps, that's, again, it really depends how you see it. I'm not a guy to say that this way is right and that way is wrong. Some people, they love lifting heavy kettlebells. They love to use it just, they want to do 5 reps and put it down, or 10 reps, and they're doing other things. Of course. But again, if you're training like that hard style, you need to do other things. You need to do some barbell training if you're strong. If you're a beginner, or, you're a smaller person, then yeah, of course the kettlebell can be heavy enough. If you're a 110-pound woman, of course, if you're doing swings with 40 kilo, that's going to be all the weight you'll ever need, right? But, for like a guy, a strength athlete that's strong and big, even a 48 kilo is not going to be a 1 rep max. So, if your interest is just getting stronger, they're going to use a lot of barbell training for that. It's not that, obviously Gear Voice Sport used a lot of barbell training too, at certain stages of a training cycle. But for general fitness, if you understand the progressions, you don't actually need anything more than a kettlebell. You can do everything with just a couple, just having a set of kettlebell, because you can have the range of weights that you need. You can manipulate the time, and you can manipulate the speed, and you can take that very, very far and pretty much progress indefinitely for the rest of your life, as long as you're smart about doing it. It's not always about, whereas something like powerlifting, it doesn't have that longevity unless you back down in weight as you get older, which most powerlifters aren't going to do, just because the mindset isn't about going down in weight. Right. So
obviously we mentioned your book and the course. Do you have other resources you would recommend to check out to learn more about Gear Voice Sport?
I would say, most of the really great resources, there's limited, I guess, knowledge in English. There's some maybe training manuals. Dennis Vasilia, for example, WAKSC. He has a good training manual. As far as English books, I would say Jeff Martone has an excellent book. He's very knowledgeable. Most of the really top resources, though, are still coming from Russia, and there's not a lot in the English language as far as really. As far as I know, my book is, I would say for sure, one of the most extensive. Mm-hmm. I would say Jeff Martone's book is very good. But yeah, there's not, the science and these types of researches that have been done in the Russian sports system, those are in Russian language. I don't read, I don't speak Russian. It's not really going to be easily accessible for most people. There doesn't seem to have been a big push to get those things translated into English up till now. Right. So that's where you're going to find kind of the modern research as far as the actual studies that have been done to the benefit of kettlebell training, specifically kettlebell sport athletes. And, the rest of the resources, most of the available resources outside of, my book, Jeff's book, maybe a few others, most of the really good resources are going to be more visual aids like YouTube or DVDs, myself, there's some very good instructors. The challenge is always finding a good instructor that has good technical skill but understands how to teach, because there's a lot more good lifters and good athletes than there are good lifters and good athletes that actually know how to communicate well and clearly. So like anything, it's you have to look around to really find a good coach. But really, the best resources is going to be hands-on. Other than the books that have been mentioned already, including my own, the best research is going to be getting with a well-trained trainer, a local trainer, whether it's IKFF certified, whether it's Strong First certified, whether it's someone that's. I'm not suggesting every certification is good, because I don't think everyone is, but there's certain like Strong First, like RKC, like IKFF, stood the test of time, have been around for many years, have developed many trainers. So more than likely, if a listener was going to get someone that was legitimately certified by one of these, they're going to be pretty safe, I would assume. At least from my point of view, I don't certify anybody that doesn't earn it. We have it with IKFF. We have a very strict testing procedure. Somebody has to demonstrate a very specific and strict competency, before they'll be certified. But there are trainers in the world, like every business. There are basically people that are not legit, or people that claim, things that aren't true. They put letters behind their name, and so someone has to do their due diligence, look around, see who's out there, ask questions. That's the best way. It's like if you're learning martial arts, I wouldn't suggest someone to try to learn martial arts off of YouTube or off of a book. I would recommend that they find a really good teacher. Kettlebells isn't as technical. You could learn kettlebells off of a good DVD, good videos. Much easier than you could learn martial arts, but still it's best to have hands-on, at least to develop the foundation, and then from there, once the person learned the basic lifts, they can actually develop it from there on their own.
Right, that's good. One question I had as you were describing all that, so kind of my entry point has been through Strong First, and some friends and colleagues and a mentor of mine has also started to do some gear voice sport as well. So one, I guess the first question is, what would be some challenges when going from a hard style background to a gear voice sport, in terms of the breathing or the technique and stuff? Like, I imagine there's some things that you would have to, quote unquote, unlearn, right? Well said.
Like everything, mind first. So I think that the main limitation or challenge is having a cup that is too full. Someone may be very experienced professionally, may be very successful as a trainer, or very accomplished, let's say, in hard style. So if they go into it with the mindset that they already know, it'd probably make the learning more difficult. So being able to empty the cup and just be receptive to learning, and be willing and able to kind of go take a step back and kind of build up. That's probably the most important factor, because if someone can do that, they can learn any technical changes, and then it's just practice. So that's kind of the mental aspect, which is the most important. Physically, definitely the breathing, the breath holding is going to be a detriment, certainly for gear voice sport. So learning the breathing pattern, it will probably be one of the main challenges. The use of tension a lot of times that they may have excessive tension or a high level or a high degree of tension in the movements. And so learning to relax more, you know, there's misconception. It's not to say that you don't have tension in grip sport, because it's results are results. You can move the weight or you can't. If you can move the weight, it requires a muscular function. So it's not to say there's no tension. It's to say the timing of it is going to be very different, and what the emphasis is very different. And so, you know, fundamental philosophy is different in that the hard style, for the most part, the objective is to accomplish as much work as possible in few reps. And in kettlebell sport, it's to use as little effort as necessary and do more reps.
Right.
So
efficiency is very important.
Right. You know, so if you have the energy, yeah, exactly. Efficiency. And so, you know, and if someone is trying to market hard style, they might say that efficiency is not their objective because they want power, but that's a miscommunication, misunderstanding, either intentional or unintentional. Power and efficiency are not opposites, and they are not mutually exclusive. In fact, if you're going to optimize power, you need to have efficiency as a part of that equation, because power, you know, and again, we take personal feelings, we take the emotions out of it, we analyze it for what it is. Power is work per unit of time. So a component of work is tension, in the sense that we need tension to produce force, right? So force is a component of the amount of work. So, and then time is the other. So it's work per unit of time. And so what I'm saying is that efficiency, in order to be powerful, we have to get rid of anything that is reducing our ability to move quickly. I want to move as fast as I can within the parameters of the technique, not so fast that you shorten or change the technique. No, you do the technique correctly, but you do it as fast as you can. And so that's going to give you a higher power output than if you move the same load slowly. And so in order to move as fast as possible, you have to get rid of any restrictions, any tension that is not facilitating the movement. You see, so the goal of every lifter, regardless of whether they are doing 1 rep or 5 reps or 100 reps or 1,000 reps, is to be efficient. It's just a definition of what efficient means can change depending on the load and depending on how many reps. But you know, so there is common factors, but it shouldn't be misunderstood or misconstrued as if to say, if your goal is to develop power, you should do hard style, and if your goal is to be efficient, you should do guerrilla sport. No, you have it all wrong, because at a high level guerrilla sport, you're going to be actually producing much more power. So because it's work per unit of time. And if you're talking about 1 rep, then actually we're talking about powerlifting anyway, which has nothing to do with kettlebell, because the strongest kettlebell lifter in the world is not going to be as strong as the strongest power lifter in the world. And the strongest power lifter in the world is not going to be as fit as the best kettlebell lifter. So use the tool for the job. So again, the kettlebell is not 1 rep max. So it's more reps. Therefore, efficiency, you know, has to come into the equation. And the more reps you do, the more efficient. And so naturally, if your main method is to train higher reps, your technique does become more efficient. It does become more precise, because you learn to eliminate the inefficiencies. It becomes necessary if you're going to do a lot of reps. If you're going to do 5 reps, you can have inefficiencies and you may not even realize it, because you're not under load for a very long time. But if you stay under load for a long time, it's going to really break you down. You're not going to continue. So you have to figure out how to, you know, so it's not tricks. It's really techniques. And what I would say is, if you learn the method, you can go from doing high reps to go to low reps. Like, it's a lot easier to learn in reverse, in my opinion. So to go from, say, good voice sport foundation and then change the hard style is much easier than to go from hard style to good voice sport. Because you can always go heavier and do less reps, but you're not going to learn how to do high reps by only doing low rep sets with heavy weight. You have to train high reps to do it because it's a specificity, and it's something called special endurance or specific endurance. You only can do it by doing the movement. I won't be able to do 100 rep snatch set by doing 10 sets of 10. It's not going to develop the endurance, even though I'm doing the same volume. I have to be able to do one set of 100. You see, so it's a skill that you develop they don't develop that special endurance in hard style because the method doesn't allow for it. And that's really, I guess, the point that I'm making to illustrate it. So for an experienced lifter, there's really no other choice. There's nowhere to go but up or to stay the same. So it depends on your goal, though. If you're content to just get your sweat on, you don't need to do great voice sport. It's beyond, what you need for your goals. But if you want to be as good as you can be and with a kettlebell, then, great voice sport is the method that's going to allow you to achieve your highest level.
Right. Yeah, definitely. It's definitely something I'm interested in learning more of. I see a lot of parallels between it demands that high level of technical efficiency for a longer period of time. It reminds me a lot of rowing.
I would imagine so.
You know what I mean? So everybody in the A final is very technically proficient, and everybody is very powerful. And
for sure,
you're getting off the line at a very high stroke rate and going down the course, and the objective is who's going to get their paddle ball across the finish line first. And in some ways, it's strikingly similar to some of the three lifts that are part of gear voice sport. Because it's 10 minutes is how many reps you can get in. So
like stroke rate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if you can set a very demanding pace and get out in front of your competitors, that puts you in a really good position. You're kind of getting up. It's almost like you have a lead in a sense. That it's just sort of parallels I've kind of seen that has really kind of sparked my curiosity to learn more about it and try to start practicing it and stuff. So I think it's
a very useful training protocol, very, very versatile and again, you have, I'm not an expert in the rowing. I can't say, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I know enough about energy systems and movement patterns to, figure out, you don't have to work in a specific area to be able to appreciate the basic foundational necessities. And, if you have to be able to row the distance, whatever the distance is, especially if it's a longer distance, like 10,000 meters. So you have to be able to complete the distance. On the same token, you also want to train interval training. So you also want to do shorter, more sprint sets and repeats with a rest period in between. So naturally, those would be part of rowing methodology as well. You would probably have your longer rows, and then you would have your sprints. However, if you're going to do a long distance, if you're going to row, say, 10,000 meters or longer, you're not going to train by that exclusively by doing sprints. At some phases of the training, you also need to be able to do the 10,000 meters or even beyond. So kettlebell is the same in that regard.
Yeah.
And so where the limitation a lot of people do, if again, I'm I think it's all good, so this shouldn't be misinterpreted as a dig. It's not a dig. It's just I have a lot of experience, and I've, you know, seen all facets and been involved in all facets. So I have, I'm speaking from experience. And you asked for me to make the comparison, so that's why I'm doing it. But with the hard style, the concept of pacing doesn't really exist. And pacing is of crucial importance. It's one of the fundamental principles that one must learn with kettlebell. And, so in order to pace, you have to first complete the distance and be able to do it slowly.
Right.
And, so you can, because the longer it goes, the more the aerobic base, or the aerobic energy system comes into play. And so you have to be, it's like if you're going to run a 5K, you have to be able to complete the whole distance. It doesn't matter if you sprint out in front, for the first 3K and you don't win after 3K. You got to go the whole 5K. So if you can only be in first at 3K, but then you fall back because you didn't train yourself to go the longer distance.
Or you blew
and that's
up.
the thing with hard style. It can be very, very strong for 10 reps, heavyweight. Yes. But the ones that are really very more, the leaders or the stronger athletes of strong first, they're always coming with a background. They already came into it, maybe, doing a lot of powerlifting or Olympic lift. They've already been training with weights for a long time, so they can pick up the heavy kettlebells and excel in that format because they're using their existing base. That's different than starting fresh in a brand new thing. You have to learn from the beginning, and that takes time. You know what I mean? None of those guys would step into a kettlebell sport competition and go in and expect to win, much less even probably do, very well. Not unless they had at least, 3 months, 6 months training going into it, because it's a different method. And if you have that strength, it will become an asset for you once you learn the technique and once you learn the pacing. But if you don't learn how to pace, your strength you're not really going to be able to be useful in the strength. And MMA is like another example. It's like, yeah, you need to be powerful, but you're not going to knock out everybody in the first round. It's ridiculous to assume that you're going to knock out every person. Sooner or later, you're going to meet someone that can counter your power and nullify your ability to knock them out. And so you're going to be forced to have to go the distance. So you have to be able to work for that whole time. The endurance is very important. So even for power athletes, the endurance is very important because you have to finish what you start. And, so that argument that I've seen a lot coming out of, in the kettlebell community, or say, oh, I'm training football players, they just need to be powerful. Yes, of course. But the game is won and lost in the fourth quarter.
Right.
And so you have to be just as powerful at the end as you are at the beginning. And that's the fundamental difference, is in Goethe sport, you're powerful at the end also. Right. In hardstyle, you're powerful only for the first number of reps, and then you hit the wall and you got to stop. And in Goethe sport, that is called the warm-up. So...
Yeah, no, it's different. It's different for sure.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that you said, the pacing, I think there's also a huge rhythm component to it.
Yeah, rhythm is part of pacing. Exactly. It's finding the cadence, and it's, different ways to do it. If it's strokes per minute, if it's steps per minute, if it's reps per minute, if it's breaths per minute, there's different ways to gauge it. And you can use a clock, you can use a metronome. There's also different ways to maintain that pace. Yes.
Yeah. Definitely another parallel to rowing.
And music, and again, it's scientific, it's finding the rhythm, like you said, finding the rhythm and sustaining the rhythm. And because inertia is a key component of kettlebell. It's the swing. That's what the swing is for, is it's understanding how to utilize inertia, which is primary law of physics. It says a body set in motion stays in motion unless enacted upon by an external force. A body at rest tends to stay at rest unless enacted on. by an external force. So you use the large muscles of your body to get it moving, and you keep it moving. And in order to keep it moving, you have to have the breathing and you have to have the pacing. If you go too fast, you won't sustain the breathing, which means you have to stop. If you go too slow, you'll be able to sustain it, but you'd have no chance of winning because you're going too slow.
Right.
So you got to be able to go fast, but still maintain the breathing throughout until the very end. And that's when you can sprint and get into that, that anaerobic, because you're almost done. So you can give it your all, and then you're on empty, but it doesn't matter because you finished.
Right.
But you can't be on empty midway through. If it's 10 minutes and you crash after 7, no chance of winning.
Right. Yeah. No, it's definitely, like I said, it's been something that's sparked my curiosity for quite some time. So it's been interesting to read about it. Now I'm looking forward to start trying to apply it in person a little bit more. So
great. Yeah. I'm happy to give you tips anytime. Just let me know.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Is there anything else that you want to cover before we move into the rapid fire portion?
No, let's just go to the rapid fire.
Cool. All right. So these are just questions I ask every guest, just for kind of the audience to get to know you a little bit better. But this is like way off of the like topics. These are kind of, some of these are just like fun questions to get to know Steve Cotter a little bit more.
Right on.
So, Steve, given all your experience in life and all the knowledge that you've accumulated up to this point, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give yourself 15 years ago?
Love more.
All right. If you had to pick one, what's your favorite strength training exercise?
Body weight pull up on a fat grip.
Oh, man. All right. How has your training changed today compared to 15 to 20 years ago?
Much less focused on the ego, much more focused on the internal and range of motion, and being pain-free is now the priority, whereas 15 years ago, I was still more interested in moving heavier weight.
Okay. Have you ever had an injury? And if so, how did that affect your movement or your training?
I've had injuries. Worst injury was when I was 13 years old. I broke my wrist. I was doing a lot of martial arts at that time. So it prevented me from doing, a lot of the movements, a lot of the exercises. But there's a silver lining in every cloud. And so during that time, I was working more legs. I really perfected the pistol squat because there was so many things I couldn't do with my broken wrist. So I used it to my advantage.
Awesome. What is one thing that junior athletes, so athletes in the like high school, so like 14 to 18 years old, that age range, they should be doing more of to complement their training and their health?
Meditation and a correct, well-rounded flexibility program.
Excellent. What's your favorite meal?
I'm going to have to give you two because it depends on the time of day.
Okay.
One would be a green apple with some nut butter, like cashew, walnut, almond butters. The other would be beans and avocado.
Oh, nice. Yeah, love avocado. What's one book, can be from any genre, that everyone should read?
Tao Te Ching.
Okay. Who have you studied or do you continue to study in your career to learn and improve?
Kind of stumped me there. Primarily movement experts, many names. I look to some, excellent yoga teachers, anybody that's very skillful with movement. Not a particular focus of one person right now. It's more my own practice. Actually, myself, to be honest, my own practice is the more important thing. I'm not so much onto the research as much as the practice. But anything that catches my eye that looks skillful, that's something I always look into.
Cool. Well, that takes us to the end of the rapid fire. So we are at the end of the interview. This has been a real pleasure. I really appreciate you coming on, and
me too.
Yeah, sharing so much of your experience and knowledge, and really providing some great insight and context into kettlebell training. I won't even say one particular area, but just overall. And I will point back to the quote that I read from your book at the very beginning of the interview when we first started, to appreciate and know. Again, I'm paraphrasing now. But to appreciate and know where we're capable of going, we have to understand the kind of the roots and the history that was before us. So,
wholeheartedly agree.
Awesome. So, Steve, thanks so much. Just hang on the line and let me give you a proper goodbye.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this brand new episode of the Leo Training Podcast. If you like the content, please take a moment, hop on over to iTunes and drop in a 5-star review. Or better yet, share it on your favorite social media network, such as Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or Instagram. And be sure to tune in next week when I have another brand new episode featuring Steve Millis and Emily Bearden, Muay Thai coaches and kettlebell experts at 5 Points Academy in New York City.
Thanks for listening to the Leo Training Podcast. Subscribe and get even more expert training tips at www.leotraining.io.